Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name's Jen and I'm here in Melbourne, Florida. If you've ever flipped through one of these seed catalogs or even tried to shop in a big box store for some of these seed packets, chances are you've encountered some terms you don't know the definition of. In today's video, I'll be sharing the meaning of heirloom, hybrid, non-GMO, organic, and even open-pollinated seeds. I'll also share some information about how different plants are pollinated, and you don't want to miss the second half of this video where I share Florida-specific tips about how you can leverage each one of these different seed types to improve your Florida garden. Let's get into it. Let's kick it off with heirloom seeds. Usually there's some kind of indicator on the seed packet, like it is right here on a botanical interest packet, where it says heirloom. Heirloom means the genetics are stable and have been for approximately 50 years or longer. These tend to be seeds that have been passed down from generation to generation because of their incredible flavor and texture characteristics. Some of them even have a really rich history that can be fun to learn about. All heirloom seeds are open-pollinated. Open-pollinated means they have stable genetics, so you can save the seeds, plant them again, and expect the same crop to come up. The difference between open-pollinated and heirloom seeds is simply the longevity of the genetics. Heirloom seeds have been around for at least 50 years generally, and open-pollinated seeds don't quite have that tenure. This Chinese broccoli seed packet that I picked up from Botanical Interests is not heirloom, but it is open-pollinated. Heirloom and open-pollinated seeds are great for seed saving, but they're not always the best at being resistant to your local pests and diseases. A hybrid seed is one that's created by cross-pollinating two different varieties of the same plant. The goal of creating a hybrid seed is to combine the best qualities of the two parent varieties. Those desirable traits could be the yield timing, the yield amount, the flavor, pest resistance, or even disease resistance. An example of a hybrid I'm growing in my garden is the Florida Brilliance strawberry. This variety was bred for its red, glossy finish, its firm texture, and its high early yields. Hybrids can be really beneficial to have in your garden, but they do come with a downside. You cannot save the seeds from a hybrid plant, replant them, and expect to have the same crop. They will not grow true to type. It will not be the same as its parent plant. So a hybrid seed is one that you're going to have to continue to repurchase every time you run out of seeds. So what about organic seeds? If I plan to grow organically, does it really matter if I start with organic seeds or not? Take a look at this Everglades tomato seed packet. You can see it says it's an organic seed. But if you look at this similar seed packet for a Seminole pumpkin, it does not say organic. Organic seeds are saved from organically grown crops. There may be a little bit of an upside about how well those seeds can handle pests and diseases on their own, since they've been grown without synthetic fertilizers and without pesticides and fungicides. But this is one term that I choose to pretty much ignore when I'm shopping for seeds. What matters more to me is that my produce is grown using organic practices. It is worth noting, though, that the USDA standards for organic certification require the use of organic seeds unless there are none available. What about GMO and non-GMO seeds? GMOs are genetically modified organisms in which genes have been injected into that plant's DNA, usually to provide some resistance against pests or herbicide use. GMO seeds are usually used by large-scale farms. There are some consumer concerns about the long-term health effects of eating GMO crops. The good news for the home gardener is you really don't have to worry about this one because GMO seeds are not available for home use. GMO seeds have been created by large corporations, and they're usually highly protected as intellectual property for those companies. So when you see a seed packet like this one that says non-GMO, and then you see a seed packet like this one that doesn't say anything about GMO, rest assured they're both non-GMO. Now that we understand different seed types, let's talk about some different methods of pollination that plants use. First, let's talk about self-pollination. Self-pollinating plants are those that create a flower that contain both the male and female parts. Self-pollination can happen pretty easily as long as the flowers get some sort of vibration from wind or insects. Now, within the self-pollinating category, we can break crops down into two different groups. The first group is your leafy greens, your herbs, and your root veggies that do not need pollination before harvest. They do, however, need pollination before reproducing. The other group of vegetables do require self-pollination prior to harvest, and some examples of those crops are okra, tomatoes, and beans. Again, these plants are self-pollinating, so the flowers contain both the male and female parts, requiring only a little bit of vibration to set fruit. Now that we've talked about our self-pollinating crops, there's also a category that requires insect or manual pollination. Some examples of those crops include squashes, most types of cucumbers, cantaloupes, watermelon. These are the types of crops that create both a male and a female flower. A female flower is one that has a tiny version of the fruit on it. Usually these get naturally pollinated by bees and other pollinators in the garden. But you can also intervene and do some manual hand pollination to help your crops set fruit if your insect population is too low. Okay, so now we understand the different types of seeds and we understand the different types of pollination. Now, how can we use that information to our advantage as a Florida gardener? This is the fun part. I've got some really creative ideas for you, but first I'm going to need you to hit that subscribe button if you're finding value in this video so far. Let's start by talking about two different methods we could use to fight a common disease on cucumber plants. Here in Florida, most of our cucumber plants are going to get downy mildew or powdery mildew, and they're very difficult to grow. Option number one is finding a hybrid cucumber like a Poinsett 76 that's known to be resistant to mildews. By choosing a disease-resistant cucumber, you'll improve your chances of getting a good harvest of cucumbers. Although the plant may still get the disease, it's probably less severe and a little easier to manage. But if you chose a hybrid Poinsett 76 to plant, you wouldn't be able to save those seeds and plant it again next year. So if you wanted to save seeds, what's another option you could do to help fight the diseases? Option number two is be selective about your heirloom crops and choose one that's fast maturing in hopes that you can outrun the disease. That's the option I'm choosing this year by growing Boston pickling heirloom cucumbers. These are fast maturing. You should get a big yield within 2 months of sowing seeds. And since they're heirloom, I can save the seeds and I'll never have to buy another seed packet of Boston pickling cucumbers again. So that was an example of how we can use our knowledge about hybrids and heirlooms to fight against some common diseases in Florida. But what about some common pests in Florida? Let me share this example. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you're not going to be surprised that I'm bringing up root knot nematodes again. Root knot nematodes are a common soil-borne pest in Florida, and one of the ways that we can manage our root knot nematode population is by planting resistant cultivars. The first year that I planted California Wonder bell peppers, which is an heirloom variety, I had really poor yields. This year what I've chosen to do is plant a hybrid Carolina Wonder, which was bred specifically to be resistant to root knot nematodes. Our hybrids can help us with some pests, but what about critters like squirrels and iguanas? A lot of you have watched my videos and asked for help with dealing with squirrels and iguanas. One of the top tips for dealing with iguanas and squirrels is growing under the protection of a screened enclosure, whether that's a screened-in pool deck or some insect netting on your plants. Here are some things we need to think about when planting in a screened enclosure. The crops that will easily reach harvest when grown in that environment include our leafy greens and root veggies and herbs. These are those plants that reach a harvest without any pollination at all. When it comes to our fruiting crops that require self-pollination before harvest, like our tomatoes, okra, and beans, these can also be grown in a screened enclosure, but they may need a little help with that vibration when they're flowering. Typically, the flowers will be pollinated when some bee is vibrating the flower, or even when the wind is blowing pretty hard. Inside a screened enclosure, chances are you'll still have wind, but you may want to gently shake your plant or even gently use an electric toothbrush behind the flower to provide that vibration that they need to be pollinated. If squirrels or birds or iguanas are eating your tomatoes, it may just be worth it to grow it inside a screened enclosure. Now, as far as our large fruiting crops that typically rely on insect pollination, like our squashes and most of our cucumbers, these can still be grown in a screened enclosure, but you're going to have to be very intentional about hand pollinating those plants. Now, personally, I don't struggle so much with iguanas, even though I'm on the water. We don't really have iguanas here in Melbourne. The squirrels and the birds, they don't really bother my plants either. But I've gotten so many questions about some critters eating up people's gardens that I'd love to know some of your tips in the comments below about how you guys deter your squirrels and iguanas. Please share some of your ideas below, and let's get the conversation started.